For design, you have to first find a problem, then you have to find a solution to that problem, and whatever medium the solution demands, then you have to work on that medium. Let's say you are working for a rural segment, then you probably need pamphlets and posters, but first start with the problem, and then the solution and the medium will come eventually.
How you approach design systems, do you feel they are useful?
Design system is a much more living, breathing system that should evolve over the time. However, there's a big part to it, which is how is it built? Okay, because designers build only the design side of the design system, but there's a tech side of the design system, right? And if these two are built in the right way, design system is extremely powerful.
While you mentioned that the cycles are repeating themselves, you feel has changed over the last 15 to 20 years in your journey on how people were perceiving design and how they are doing today?
The depth in design has increased, right? I think there was a time when we as a designer were supposed to do everything, and not only just design, but in the past, as the UX industry matured, we suddenly started having a lot of expertise domain. For example,
Different word.
motion designer, and then product design, UX design, UI design, then user researcher. I think the cycle is that I feel with AI this can come back again, where somebody needs to be good with a large number of things and bring them all together.
Behind every app you open, every tap you make, there's a story of people building products for millions of us. Hi, I'm Rati, and at Enzo Lab, we started this podcast to share what we have learned while helping startup design and scale digital products. This is Product and People, where we bring you real conversations with India's top product minds. From scaling design systems to finding that tiny insight that sparks $1 billion idea, we decode how product and people grow together. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and you can also listen to our full audio on Spotify. Now let's get started.
Shayak, great to have you on the podcast today. I think your journey has been inspirational across, I think, close to a couple of decades now in design. And I think some of the most impactful products, if I may say, in the Indian product and tech ecosystem across Vedantu, Myntra, Practo, I think different fields, but the impact remains consistent that you have created. And glad to be speaking today and getting a chance to be learning from you how you have sort of used your decades of experience to shape how millions of people today are either studying or let's say are shopping in the new era. So before we get started, how would you, let's say, how has your journey been? Where did you start? What does design mean to you? And how excited you are to be on the podcast today?
First of all, I'm super excited to be in this podcast. I think one of the other inspiration, like Joy, I saw him on this podcast when I was, and I like the fact that we were going very deep into some of the conversations around design, not just talking about the what is happening here and now, but going back to the roots of design. So I like that conversation, and I think super excited to be here. Also got to know you better, and so it's been. I feel privileged to be here, and happy to share and contribute whatever I can, and however the world might fit that to be used in their experience and way forward. Right. So yeah, coming to my journey. So before I got into IIT Roorkee and started studying architecture, I primarily wanted to be a physicist. Okay, at some point of time in school, and I was really preparing for that. Though I was also interested in making drawings and sketching, I used to create detailed illustrations, and I was inspired by some of the artworks of some artists like Ratin Mitra, who used to make very detailed architectural drawing. So when I started preparing for IT and got this in Roorkee as the architecture as a stream, I was quite happy that because it kind of marries both sides of the coin, which is a bit of science, a bit of art. How do you look at combining these two to make it into build something which is really really impactful? So I think so that my 5 years of my architecture was an immense learning experience. But while I was at the fag end of my 5 year course, I think I got really really interested in graphic design and started exploring that area a lot. Right, I did my internship in Total Environment, which was and it's a great firm to learn architecture. It's based out of it's a real estate developer in Bangalore, and So in 2006, I came to Bangalore and started working with the startups here. And startup was not that glamorous at that point of time. They were like, small companies which were all bootstrapped and they were doing good business. India was growing very rapidly at that point of time, and design was becoming very, very central to most of the experiences that people were trying to build. But UX was still not there in the scene anywhere. Nobody used to speak about. I think websites used to exist, but that was what was all in terms of user experience, right? But at some point of time, I had this question in my mind that a large part of the advertising and the graphic industry. I think the large part of the advertising industry is where you are trying to place or persuade the user to commit to a product or kind of a value that you are trying to put in forward of the in front of the audience. Can design play a much more fundamental role in how it impacts a human life? That kind of brought me to IDC IT Bombay, where I was seeking that what bigger role design can play. Also, I was partly interested to make films, and when I was applying for IDC, I spoke to some of my seniors, and they said, "This is not a film school. This is a design school." But I still went ahead and joined visual communication and had some amazing experience learning in that environment. So one of the very interesting part was that when I was preparing for my thesis, my professor um, came up and said, "Which topic are you going to select?" And I said, "I'm going to pick up a film. I'm going to make a film." He said, "That's not how you do design. For design, you have to first find a problem, and that problem should then you have to find a solution to that problem. And whatever medium the solution demands, then you have to work on that medium. Let's say you are working for a rural segment, then you probably need pamphlets and posters, then make pamphlets and posters. If you, let's say, are working for a multinational company or solving a problem for them and you need a digital experience, then build digital experience. If you have to make a film for a documentary film for something, make that. But first start with the problem, and then the solution and the medium will come eventually." That opened my eyes because that meant that you are not married to the medium and you don't start with the medium. Okay. And which also made visual communication a very medium agnostic field and opens up your eyes to different kind of experience building. Either it's a book or it's a poster, and I think those are some of the fundamentals and foundations that goes into building you as a designer. Eventually, I did make two films. I kind of reverse engineered the whole situation to find a problem which required me to make a film, and also in the process learned that how difficult filmmaking is, because from the outside it looks very simple that you pick up a camera and start shooting, but yeah, there's so much that goes behind making a film. But yeah, I think what was happening was that when I was graduating 2008, 2007 is when iPhone was launched, and I was looking at the whole world and I was thinking that the way digital experiences is going to change because of iPhone is going to be absolutely mind-boggling, right? And I realized that this space is going to just blow up. Okay. And that's when I met a couple of my friends from IIT Roorkee, and we started a company which was one of the earliest design agency based out of Bangalore called Cheese. And we worked with a couple very, I mean, a good number of very interesting projects for 2.5 years before we got acquired by a software development company. So that's how I entered into the industry. And for me, user experience, UX design, product design is something we saw getting developed in India. It's been an amazing journey. I think I'm quite excited about the future as well, because this is like all you can see patterns going around, that something comes up, it changes the way design impacts, and then it goes stabilizes, and then again something comes up, and like this sinusoidal waves coming up. So yeah.
No, no, that's quite an interesting journey, I think, from filmmaking to eventually realizing how some part of that is also within design. And I think you also mentioned about that design is not bound to a medium. That actually stuck with me, that when you are thinking about solving a problem, it can be across different avenues, different mediums. And I think that is, I think, something that would be great learning for all of us listening, and obviously
Yeah.
for a future perspective as well. And obviously, I went through your background, but I didn't know that you were a founder yourself. I think you have been pivotal to the startup ecosystem in India. And given that journey of being, let's say, a design agency founder to now actually leading the design for millions of people from a product perspective, I think you are seeing both sides of the world across a large horizon. So, anything, Shayak, that you feel while you mentioned that the cycles are repeating themselves, you feel has changed over the last 15 to 20 years in your journey on how people were perceiving design and how they are doing today?
I think um, one of the things that has changed is definitely the depth in design has increased, right? Because in previously, when we started off, because breadth was slightly more important. And see, this happens with every industry, right? As the industry matures, the depth increases. Like, for example, medical history at some point of time, in the medical profession, you had one doctor, but then you had a doctor for a ear, you had doctor for an eye, you had doctor for something, right? So I think there was a time when we as a designer were supposed to do everything, and not only just design, but I think some of us have heard about this term service design, right? Which is completely designing an end-to-end all touch points, that, like you said, medium, when you bring all of them together into one single project. That, okay, let's say I am designing for the public transport infrastructure, then there are so many different mediums, so many different touch points. So designers previously were supposed to do all of that, also go slightly deeper, or maybe work in some cases with experts to even go deeper, and then solve for those. In the past, as the UX industry matured, we suddenly started having a lot of expertise domain. For example,
Different wording.
motion designer, and then product design, UX design, UI design, then user researcher. I mean, at some point of time, a designer was expected to do all of that together. And I think the cycle is that I feel with AI, this can come back again, where somebody needs to be good with a large number of things and bring them all together. Very interestingly, I remember, and just to share perspective to it, is that if you look at it, when I was interviewing at that point of time, when I was just graduating, so I was giving some interviews, and HP Labs, when I was talking to HP Labs, and I remember HP Labs, they told me that, okay, so they were hiring me as a designer, and they said that you will be a part of a team which will have a designer, a developer, and also a psychologist, somebody who has studied psychology. Okay, so and that's how they bring together three different kind of expertise, and then you work together to build those experiences. But interestingly, they mentioned that they have also some labs outside India. I don't remember the countries. I think it was Singapore or somewhere else, where they hire people who is a designer, who has done a bachelor's in computer science, double masters in a master's in design, and double masters in psychology. So one guy. Okay, here we had three people. Okay,
Yeah.
and there they had only one person who has done all of this, studied, and the depth that they also bring is amazing. Like, and I think we need to be see much more beyond just one area or something. I think designers need to be multifaceted that way.
No, that's a brilliant take on how I think the profession started with one person doing everything so that they have a holistic view. And then I think because of the demand of the nature, I think they broke up into smaller verticals. Someone was having an expertise in research, someone in UI, someone in UX. I think there was a motion designer as well that came up. And now everything is again getting sort of into a single profession, because now with AI, a lot of grunt work I think AI can do, but the problem solving is expected that someone with good in like someone who can really understand what is breaking can
I think
actually.
I think the point here should be that the expertise will stay because the depth has already reached there. So a motion designer will be very critical to the overall experience. But then the overall orchestration which is required at the top, that
Yeah,
again becomes critical, right? And I think those roles will also come back as also very important roles, right? So I think that's what, not that you can't expect somebody with breadth to go and work and be expert in everything that they're doing. But that was also the case in the past, that when you are doing all of these things. So for example, if you are a designer and building something, and you have to get some kind of solid products made, physical products, then you have to go in and talking to the craftspeople or somebody who is expert in material science, and bringing all of those together to build those things. So I think similarly, those orchestration and this is required to bring together those experts and build something up.
sure, sure. I think from a skill set perspective, while we'll deep dive on that towards the end of the podcast, but I believe that we are at a very interesting juncture where a lot of people today actually are confused what they should learn, where should they go into depth of, because I think AI is obviously at a very, very interesting juncture, right? I think the iPhone moment that you mentioned back in 2008, 2009, I think we are at the similar age where AI is about to explode. I think it's already exploding, and then people are worried what would future professions, jobs, and careers would look like. And that is where I think you share a very important perspective. And on an overall level, I think before we move forward, I think something that caught my eye was your background image. I think I think you also have built something, and you have painted, if I'm not wrong, which is visible in your background.
No, that's not painted. This was a poster that of Bob Marley. I think this just out of it's built out of all his CDs and all of that. So this poster has been with me for many years now. So.
Okay. No, I think I've always felt that people who are very, very good in design, or let's say articulating how experiences and influences should look like, generally have a good niche for people who are very good with storytelling, or let's say are very artistic.
Uh,
And I think that somehow I felt that in the professions or designers as of today, that artistic vibe in a way is dying down. They're becoming more mechanical. But before we move forward, any take from your end? Does that add to the creativity? Does it help in becoming and creating better interfaces?
uh, See, I think I think and this is a very huge topic, right? And difficult to answer in a short span of time. But
Sure.
then it goes back to the question: is what is art, right? And and what is art? What is craft? And what role do they play? I think, like I always say that and again, nothing is absolute. Okay, today what is art is not art tomorrow, and today what is not art tomorrow can be an art. Okay. um uh, and I have a very different take that if you talk about a very rational take on that, is that life is only going to evolve. Okay, and what we learned in the past, they can be the scaffolding on which something is built, but the definitions of art and craft is going to change definitely. Now, if a young person today is building something which is meaningful and which is progressive in nature, whether he is impacted by the art and craft that I will use to build something, or he or she uses something totally different to be inspired from, is completely okay. I mean, that as long as it progresses the human race and everybody around us. The bigger questions are that whether it is actually progressing us or not. Okay, so once that is established, I think, for example, we are all building things which are built on top of what the Romans or the Indus Valley civilization or ancestors have built. But I don't think we have studied that deeply about their art and craft, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and if they were to be there, they would say that, okay, today's kids are like, they are looking at these and building all of this, and this is, so I think, but I think the bigger question is that anybody who is building and crafting something of worth, that person by themselves would feel the need to go deeper and search for those, and then and answers in the kind of art and craft that we're talking about. So it's not that, and there are so many trends going around, so they will come and go, but the people who are really building something meaningful, I think even youngsters today, or the people who are going to change the world, they will themselves know that they have to look back and look at deeply at these things and build those muscles. The question is that how many of them, because with extra specialization, there will be a lot of noise in the world going forward, and there will be a very, very sharp end of the spectrum where people will be building something very, very fundamental and meaningful, and those number of people will be very small. Okay, so whether you are here or whether you are there, that is a decision that you have to take and decide that whether you, and what do you need to take to kind of reach there.
Understood. No, no, that's a very brilliant take. I think how I look at it is, what you meant is that different people may have different sources to look for creativity and inspiration in today's world. But I think the nuance has remained largely similar, that you have one avenue or maybe multiple avenues, and that will continue to happen. So, Shaik, I think obviously I've been a follower of you at least on LinkedIn since a long time, and I think you keep sharing a lot of anecdotes which are really, really valuable. I think one thing that you have mentioned a few times in your talks and on LinkedIn is that generally design does not have universal absolutes, but it generally has only fewer local truths. I think that makes a lot of sense on how I look at it. That basically, at your journey, right, in the past, something that may have worked at one startup or with one TG may not work with other TG. But on an overall level, how do you decide, let's say, when a principle is universal in nature, which can be applied across different places, different sort of stages of firm you are, or the kind of problem you are solving, or the kind of users you're solving for, or basically that principle is only applicable for that local minima and then you cannot scale that infinitely?
I think, to be frank, I think this is primarily one of the most important goals that we have to identify. So, first of all, there is no universal truth. So, it's just that you have to figure out that the current local truth that you want to work with, how big is that local truth? Like,
Okay.
what is the time span that it kind of does? Okay. And you have to find those sweet local truths which is probably help you build something, because you might be building today something, and that is such a so much local that it's not relevant tomorrow. Then you have wasted your time, right?
Yeah.
And you start believing in something you thought that was the universal truth, and then you realize that it's not actually. So I think the biggest role as a design leader also becomes that you have to build that muscle to see and evaluate that how, what is the uh, what is the strength of that local truth, and how long that is going to stay relevant, right? um, and like you said, that for that you can do a lot of good research, and again, you cannot be 100% right every time, but yes, there can be a rigor of, disciplined way of trying to find that out, that how relevant it is. Like, for example, when markets go up and down, when you go to a new market, you see some, new development happening, so you start to figure out that, okay, these are the patterns that are emerging, and they probably are going to be relevant. And this is something that I've learned over the time, right? I've seen things come and go, I've seen things stay, I've seen things, dissolve into nothingness. Okay, so I think all of that exists. It's the job that, and as a design leader, again, it's about trying to figure that out. Okay, this is relevant for the business, for, the kind of optimizing your investment in that whole exercise of that local truth, and then making a business sense out of it. So I think there is no one single process of doing this, but this is the skill that you have to bring on the table, where you have some foresight, you have some product understanding of the things, and you can make that choice.
Understood. No, no, very, very fair. Any framework that you have followed in the past, Shaik, which we can share with the audience who is tuned in today to understand that, let's say, whether this thing is a local, let's say, aspect, or it can be a universal principle, or that comes by experience? That can also be the answer. But how do
No, I
you?
think I think I think the basic framework is just ask multiple whys and multiple questions around that. Go deeper. So, for example, let's say, and you can start with any aspect, and like I said, there's no single answer. But then just go by asking that. Okay, Airbnb recently redesigned their app,
Yeah.
and we can do this exercise at, okay, why is it relevant? The design, ethos that they have adopted, why is it relevant right now? What is it bringing? Is it relevant for the demography? If it is relevant for all demography, okay, and Airbnb is a global, it's getting to global market, why is it working for Indian market as well as this market? Is it because of the audience? I think the thing is that when you are particularly solving a problem and you're trying to find a local truth, you cannot be, you wouldn't have a ready framework for that. But these questions, when you ask around everything around you, and I do that continuously. For example, when I'm looking at a couple of days back, I was just looking at the Swiggy and Zomato app, and now talking about a visual design. I'm looking at, okay, there's a Swiggy's font is like, slightly wider,
Hmm.
and they use a couple of points, maybe higher font size, but because to adjust that, they have to now use, put a negative letter spacing. Okay, and while on the Zomato they have put it, a positive letter spacing to keep the letters slightly wider. Now, why have they done that, and which of the thing is actually creating more clutter versus non-clutter? Now, there's no truth. I mean, you can be doing this versus you can be doing this, but all these decisions that you make, I think it's the power of observation that you keep using everywhere, and you question every decision that you see around yourself. Sometimes what is very obvious on the face of it, you can realize there are multiple layers of. For example, The another one that I usually talk about a lot is YouTube's short. Okay, and if you scroll through YouTube short, you will see that they are now a grid of four.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The question is that why it is a grid of four? Because I have seen that they have been making choices. First, they started with a carousel, then they went back to putting them into a two shots in a in the frame, and they removed the carousel. Then they went back to carousel. Then they brought all the four. There's a logic behind it. There's a reason behind it. There's a science behind it. Okay, and then you match it with what Instagram is doing, and if Instagram is not doing that, then why it is working for them? So I think in a I question everything that I see on every app, even if it's the smallest piece. Okay, that why did they do this? Because I know that that one choice would have come through multiple level of conversation, and when you put them all of that into perspective, then you are able to kind of work around those local truths.
Understood.
So that's my way of exercising that.
No, no, that's a brilliant articulation. I think the summary that I take away is question every decision that you are making, and even if it is a smaller decision, right? As you mentioned, the letter spacing, if it is creating clutter or not, why Swiggy and Zomato are different, or let's say why something is working for Instagram and not for YouTube Shorts. So, what is that underlying? Try to think and make that as a practice. And I think that is something I believe you're trying to say that has helped you a lot in your career and can also help us differentiate what would work universally versus locally. No,
Yeah.
great. But before we deep dive into specific aspects of your career and learnings across, I think one part of your journey that really excites me is that I think you have started with, let's say, doing a bachelor's in architecture, then you went across different professions, and then you started up, and then eventually you are now running startups at, let's say, a billion plus kind of a valuation, and then taking care of design that is used by millions. Anything that you fail looking backwards, because it is generally looking backwards that we are able to connect the dots, that has prepped you very well for where you are today? What were your key learnings or key experiences that shape how you make decisions as a design leader today?
Yeah, I think what has worked for me is primarily, and especially is after I moved into a leadership role, is being very close to the context. Because or like um, when you're trying to build something for a company, you need to have the complete context of that company. It sometimes takes months, it sometimes takes years to build that context in the right way, so that you know the what are the fundamentals that is driving the organization.
Understood?
And for that, then you are building something. It cannot be that design has a sub, or or a function has a subculture, okay, or a sub, a sub segment which is have a very different context. It is not possible. So whether a company is early in its growth stage, whether the company is late in its growth stage, whether the organization has enough profit, or they have good runway for the future, or they are completely on investor money, all of these, every aspect of that organization is important to understand. Okay, and then slightly readjust or recalibrate your design choices and decisions to support that journey of the organization. So I think that is what has, and maybe you can say that what is the secret of that. Probably I'm giving an answer which is very slightly at a meta level, but I think the point is that spend time understanding the org, okay, where you are, if you are working as a key partner in that whole organization. Because there's a difference between you working in an organization versus you coming as a consultant.
Yeah.
When you're coming as a consultant, you are just taking a short window snapshot of the organization's context and making those decisions. Okay, and you are basically giving a service, and you say that, okay, this is your concept, but I work around this context. Okay, and let's see, I will just do it, slightly tweak it for your context. But if you are within the organization, you have to highly tweak it for the context and then build it around that. So I think
Understood.
that's a difference.
No, no, that makes sense. So basically, you are saying that a lot of decision making that you are able to do well today comes from you being very, very close to, let's say, what the org stands for and having a lot of context. And whenever you are sort of trying to do anything in your career, I think try and gain that context as much as possible, because that will help you articulate your decisions better and take better design choices.
Yeah,
Cool, cool.
I think by the way, but this is not just for design. This is for everybody. Huh? Okay,
Yeah.
and I think what I'm trying to say is that when I was also, there was a time when I was a young designer, and I was brash. I was, very in my head that,
Difficult to
like,
believe.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, I was like, there have been time when I have told the clients that you don't know design, just get out. Okay, huh. Either you take my stuff or you don't take it. Okay, and all of that. But then I also learned that, when you work with different clients or different people, you push yourself to build something new. Okay, otherwise you'll be building only what you believe in and one kind of design something. And I think I enjoy that exercise of working with people to build something different every time, right?
Sure, sure. No, no, that's a beautiful take. And I think, as I think one aspect of your journey, I think would have always, I think, in a way, stretched you, because I think you have worked across obviously your own venture and then across healthcare, edtech, and now obviously e-commerce. How easy or difficult it is to, let's say, really go into the depths of, as you mentioned, right, getting that context, because the industry, the TG, and everything is different. So as an upcoming designer, let's say a lot of people who tune into our podcast, would you recommend sticking to one domain, one type of TG, or keep
Hmm.
settling around? What do you think has been your, what do you realize?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And this is a very good question. Okay. And to be frank, I don't have a very clear answer to this, but then I will tell you what has happened. See,
Sure.
I always believed that design should be, domain agnostic. Design can be domain agnostic. And I used to enjoy the fact that I could get into, any domain, quickly get the context, okay, in a reasonable time, and be able to, contribute really well. And that's been the case for the first 12 to 15 years. And now, but in the last, I think, 4 5 years, I've
Mm-hmm.
started realizing that because the industries have matured so much, you need to go really, really deep into. For example, if you're going to fintech, previously somebody who's starting a fintech is basically giving a very top level or layered, services, which is very easy to have the context built onto that. And like the number of levels of the backend services and everything that you build is fairly limited. Now, one is that I can say that, yeah, I don't give a damn about what is happening in the back end. I just only focus about the front end. But I think over the time, as you grow mature and you grow as a senior leadership, a senior designer, you need to know about the full, spectrum of what is the services and how the whole operations work. Now, that I feel is becoming much, much more complex, or maybe the online digital spaces are becoming so mature that more complexities are seeping into it. So now I do feel that somebody who's into fintech and understands the level of, let's say, trading, okay, or the level of, let's say, how trading works or future and stocks works, it's not going to be same as, quickly coming in and understanding that, right?
Understood.
Even in e-commerce, supply chain is so different and there are so many complexities to it. It's not easy for anybody to go and, get that whole spectrum fast, and start. So I think now I feel that some bit of domain expertise has become important, though
Understood.
the B2C fundamentals of design still remain same, and you can keep applying them everywhere you go. But I think more than, even if, and I would put it this way, that now it is important wherever you're going that you go to the depth of the, go to the depth of the whole domain and the context,
Okay.
because a large part of that domain and context is also, equitable to other domain and context. Okay, so for example, at some point of time, storefront design in e-commerce was, which basically evolved out of what Amazon used to do, right? Amazon's playbook. And that is still there across, a large part of that is kind of, as a playbook is followed throughout the industry. And the same playbook in the B2C domain is applicable to health tech, in ed tech, or you take, or even fintech to some extent. You will still have a, I mean, you can call it something else, but there is a concept of a storefront. So you land up there. So for example, let's say I take mutual funds. You land up to, the storefront, you actually can see all the mutual funds. It's basically a storefront. It's not a storefront because there's no store. You are not selling products, but you're selling as mutual funds, but then there is a storefront. Okay.
Okay.
So these are, kind of something that applies to every domain, every, industry. So I think, yes, I feel it's important to build depth in one domain, but
Understood.
if you have the capability to build the depth in that domain, you can actually move to others also. Because you will be able to, rewire your brain to match those connecting dots to build that. So I don't know, like, for me it has worked that I could shift context very easily. I don't know how much it will be relevant going forward, but I think, and maybe the short answer is that the amount of time that you need to build even context into one domain is slightly increased. Okay. Um,
So solutions have become more niche. Is that the reason?
Solutions have become more niche, yes, and the depth of the problem, or the complexity of the problems that you are dealing with have increased. Okay.
That's true.
So it's good to spend. Previously I could spend in 2 years. So I used to say, like in the past, that I will, if I join a company, it will take me 3 months to get the context. Okay. And 8 months before I can, and another 3 months to kind of plan out things very well and get everything ready. Next 2 years I can basically create a huge impact for the organization, okay, with what I've learned. But I think now it takes almost 1 year or 1.5 year for a very complex organization where you build your context, if you're not only looking at a very small piece.
Understood. Yeah.
And as a design leader, I'm talking about, okay, it takes me almost a year or so to get the full picture of the whole thing that is happening going around. So that's how the complexity increase. This does not apply equally to slightly younger designers, because they would be working on smaller segments. But even for them, if they actually go back and try to understand what is happening around them and learn about it, that is going to be very helpful, and that is important, I think. And it's going to take some time, so you have to be there in the system for some time to get that.
Understood. Understood. But if I summarize, would your recommendation be that designers should, while they should go in as much depth as possible, I think the rough length of stints at particular orgs might increase because it will take time for them to, let's say, increase and build context. But on an overall level, working across different actually segments give you a very, I think, in depth idea of how design can influence, and that is something that you would recommend for other people as well.
Yes, I think for you to be really impactful, it's important to have that depth. Otherwise, you won't be able to have those conversations. And for that, I think designers should, one is that stay in the system for some time to go into the depth,
Sure.
and also look beyond. If you are working on a small charter, then look beyond, because let's say if you're coming out of a tech, it would be amazing that you know the complexities of tech. Because see, the whole idea is not about replicating that complexity, but to be able to have the mental structure, or your brain wired to identify those complexities in the different organization you go, and then you start to identify those patterns, or you're able to work in that setup. So I think that building your brain, or wiring your brain to those kind of complexities, what is important, and for that you need to go deep.
No, no, fair point. One of the things, particularly as a PM, I think, because I interact a lot with product managers, I think there is always this debate that goes on in product that
uh,
whether you became, let's say, domain agnostic or you build domain depth, right? And there are PMs who switch every 2 years to a different and new industry. There are PMs who have started with e-commerce and maybe will die with the e-commerce. So both of those schools of thoughts exist. But what I have realized is that generally in product, right, because if you have been working in a domain for a long time, sometimes your solutions start getting boxed in terms of how that industry works. But then there are these moments where someone who may have implemented this in another industry, they can come up and sort of connect the dots back and suggest that, hey, maybe that is what worked in that industry, let us try that. And those creative out of the box thinking actually
hmm,
sometimes comes because people have seen different flavors, different industries, etc.
absolutely.
And maybe that is my learning in product, but just wanted to understand from you, does that help in design, does not help? And I think
No,
I got
and
a bit of
absolutely,
your answer.
I'm talking about the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm talking about the same thing, that see, even for the other person to come and contribute, who is contributing, okay, and again, I think one is that you can rely on pure serendipity, that the other person who is coming, even
Hmm.
if he's without depth, he will come and say something out of just intuition, and that will suddenly click, and something magical will happen. Versus that person coming from, he or she also has depth, but because he's coming from other domain and coming here, they are able to see the whole picture and give something which is suddenly, a little unique, than
Yeah.
somebody who's staying inside. So I think that is absolutely relevant. Okay, and I'm talking the same thing for even a designer to kind of move from one place to another. Yes, they will bring a lot of value, but if you have not built the depth here, your ability to kind of come up with
Do that.
something which is meaningful also is very, very constrained. So yes, the first point is absolutely relevant, is that when you stay here, sometimes you are probably constrained by one kind of thinking, and then hence you are not able to break through the rut of solutioning. And uh, And in fact, I think 6 or 7 years back, some of us design leaders, we used to talk and we used to feel that 2 3 years seemed like a good time in a organization, because by that time a young designer would have kind of
Picked up.
uh, uh, kind of reached some level of his covered all the things that he would have done, and then start getting into that box of thinking in the same line, when a fresh mindset is very very critical. But I think what I'm just saying is that probably that duration has slightly increased now, though we do see that there is a lot of shift that is happening at the younger designers within a span of 2 years or 2.5 years or 3 years. But I think staying in a really complex place for at least three and a little more a number of years definitely build the kind of muscle that you need to go and then impact somewhere else again.
Sure. No, no, fair, fair. And thank you for sharing that opinion, right? And I think before we jump on to different themes that we want to cover today, I think thank you again for sharing your experience. And I think your multiple decades of experience, I think it's quite, I think you have not only contributed to a lot of organizations, but I think there's a lot to learn from the overall design ecosystem perspective. And today, I think we'll try and cover some of those aspects. And again, thank you for taking out time and speaking with us. So, jumping on this to the first theme, Shayak, I think one of the themes that we feel is very, very important in product and design, and I think it was just something that we were talking about, persuasion of, let's say, making the users perform an action, right? I think that is the core narrative of what maybe a lot of us are today trying to do. So, how do you think that, I think, given your stints at Vedantu, where I think you were nudging the students to actually learn rather than going to maybe a funny cartoon channel and watch something, or maybe watch an Instagram reel, compared with, let's say, today persuading people to shop and complete an action and maybe press that buy now at Myntra when you are already vying for their attention from all the, let's say, latest apps that are coming up, vying for the same Gen Z attention. So when you think about attention, attention is what we need, right, from the users when they come to our product. What has been your key learnings across both of these products, and what do you think actually can be useful for all the people who are trying to go into an edtech or, let's say, e-commerce today?
No, I think, see, I mean, what you just mentioned is an easy trap that we all fall into, okay, and all organizations fall into that. Yes, in tech, probably we didn't start showing Netflix. You know, if you allow business to just run its course, you will eventually see something similar start coming up. Okay, so I think their design and product together plays a very big role, right? You have to put your foot down and say that this is completely, because there is a short term gain, and then obviously this is, see, we all know that you will get short term benefits, but you will in the long run you will lose out. And these still are, unfortunately, at least for design, this is still a very human choice. It's not that I can take a napkin and do that calculation that what is the long term benefit versus what is the short term benefit of making a poor design choice. And that's why designers are even more important, and along with product managers, I would say, if they don't come together and fight for the authenticity of the product, it will never work out. Okay, and so this is by far the most important role that designers and product managers they have to play, which is, and it's not, like I said, that it is not probably the business is doing it with a pure malicious intent, but it is a slow slip down that is bound to happen, if because it was you would have seen that probably sometime, but this happens. Okay, and yeah, so I would say designers have to play a huge role there. Yes.
No, sure. No, no, I totally respect that. And I think product and design have to stand up for the user in some form and shape. But when you think about persuasion, right? So, what aspects of designs do you think that, let's say, as a designer, right? What has been the framework that you have deployed to really understand that what is the core need that the user has come to for your product? And what are the tweaks or changes that you have done in the past that have worked, some of the learnings where things did not work in persuading them to make the action, right? And there I'm talking about a core action, for example, at Vedantu to learn, or let's say at Myntra to shop. So what does work in persuasion versus what does not?
I mean, I think, see, again, there's no single answer to this, because every time you have to go, like you do you try to do a research, understand the exact problem that you are solving for.
Hmm.
But I can give you some examples. So, for example, in Vedantu, when we were building for, and this is not about the purchase part, because like the large part of the purchase used to happen through active sales, right? But even take for something, some a small example, like post purchase experience, and we realized that, so obviously we would sell a course to somebody, and then that person had to come on board, and they will go through first few classes to get a sense of the whole, the experience of that, and go back and then probably decide whether they want to continue this or not. And that's where the design has to play a big role. And we realize that, and these are insight when you which you only get when you go deep and work with different stakeholders like academics, sales, that one single teacher introductory class is hypercritical for the students to retain in the overall course completion, right?
Understood.
So this correlation of this versus this was something that only came out when we did. I mean, as a designer, we didn't know that that how important that particular session plays in the overall psyche of the user. Even if you, the problem is that even if you go and ask the student, they cannot articulate this,
Understood.
and this is not easy to understand. Obviously there are data, some of the things are can be reflected in data, but in fact the truth here is that we only saw the data once we got the hang of this by talking to the users and talking to the acad team. Okay.
Understood.
And then we could see the correlation, and it actually was baked into a very key metrics at the end of the day. So I think for every place that we go, we do this exercise, right? Where, and again, when coming back to e-commerce, to persuade somebody, and in the fashion,
Mhm.
it's very interesting, because the difference between a fashion and a quick commerce is that, like, a banana, when you want to order a banana, and between, let's say, a grocery, between this to your purchase, there are few questions that you have, two or three questions, like, is it organic, or is it good, or whatever, in the price and all of that. But between the purchase of a fashion product and you have 100 questions: how it will look at me,
Yeah.
where will I wear it, what is the fabric, what is this, what is that, and all of that. And it's consistent across the platform.
Understood.
So, and that's where we have to build all those experiences, like looks, trends, that we bring on the table to help the user to make that choice. Okay. So I think that's where the even size and fit, that whether it will fit me or not. So how can you use more science, data science, or tools to kind of get the sizing right and everything. So we play a huge role into what are those, all the touch points between making that choice to this, and how can we help and build tools and features which help them to make that choice. So yeah, I think we have to find those sweet spots where design has to figure out that this is a key area where the persuasion has to really work, then
Understood.
basically develop something around it.
Understood. Understood. From a persuasion perspective, I think persuasion generally happens when you are able to trust the platform, right? And generally, in case of healthcare, since you have had a great stint at Practo as well, I think generally from healthcare perspective and how the Indian TJs, unless and until you are able to spark that trust in, let's say, whatever action they are doing on the product, I think people will not make an action. So any key learning on how you were able to create, let's say, this first time digital health behavior in people, that hey, these are the doctors, and you look at reviews and maybe go ahead, because that was something that was not existing, at least from an Indian user point, at scale before Practo came in. So how was that experience? Any key learnings from that stint?
See, I mean, very key. I mean, like I always, if you ever have a conversation with me, you will not get very direct answers. That's the unfortunate part. But the thing is, see, I mean, one very clear thing is that in Practo was known, and it became really, really loved by the users, because uh, we had great doctors on our platform.
Understood.
And at the end of the day, in healthcare, if you understand, yes, the experience matters, but at the end of the day, the doctor is the key, the point of experience. Like, if your
Understood.
doctor is good and you have a good experience with the doctor, everything else is secondary. And all those who have experienced healthcare, they would understand that. Like, you could be having a bad experience waiting for a doctor in a hospital for, let's say, 2 hours, but if that doctor is one of the most famous doctors, and you after that 2 hours you have 2 minutes of conversation and you come out satisfied, you forget about those 2 hours
Understood. Yeah.
of stand and where you were like frustrated or whatever. Now, and this is the truth. Now we saw that in healthcare when we were building Practo, that when we grew the scale, okay, then obviously the quality dropped of some, because you also had doctors who are now rated not 4.9 or 4.8, but their rating started dropping, and
Understood.
due to various algorithmic reasons some of them would go up, and that would immediately reflect back into the system, right? So I think this is the key, and obviously MC, this is a very fine balance, because there is monetization, there is a lot of other things that chips in,
Yeah.
and your algorithm has to kind of reward that versus this also. But at the end of the day, if the first part does not work, which is that if I am looking at a list of doctors and I don't see good doctors at the top of my list, my trust on the platform will erode over the time. So I think, and this is true for every industry, it's e-commerce or this, if you are not seeing in the first scroll really relevant and quality, even if, see, it could be that I don't purchase a high quality item, or I don't go to a very expensive highly rated doctor, but those coming in the first is very, very critical.
Understood.
That is a, we can be talking about 100 different things, but if this does not work out, then no amount of other things will help build those trust.
Understood. And let's say from, I think it's a commonly known term, right? There are millions of people, 500 million, who are coming online for the first time in the last 5 years in India. And these are called as the next half billion. So I'm assuming that healthcare was one of the first use cases, right? Where a lot of people would have come in touch with, let's say, digital interfaces once, let's say, they really came on the internet. So any differences that you saw in terms of expectations from user perspective, or what was their behavior offline and when they came online from a healthcare perspective, and that was something, let's say, that startled you, that you had not expected, and then you had to, let's say, incorporate that into the product from a design perspective?
Yeah, I think a lot of small things, but I think one thing that we never thought will pick up. I mean, business thought that it will pick up, but we as a designer never thought that it can give you the same amount of experience and confidence.
Mhm.
Is online consultation. I mean, even before COVID hit, okay, we never thought that it's going to be, it will see the adoption that we thought it will.
Understood.
But for very simple and small problems, health problems, we saw a huge adoption of that term, online consultation. So yeah, I mean, this is something that was completely outside the textbook. I mean, we didn't thought that it will happen.
Let's say from a doctor perspective, generally, so my parents come from a tier 2 city, right? And even today when I nudge them that, hey, let's say there is a good doctor at Fortis, I can arrange an online consultation, they're generally very hesitant. They feel that, hey, how will they check the vitals, right? Generally doctors in the past have been,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
say, touching you, feeling you, and then sort of sharing that, hey, let's say this is there, and having real time conversations. Maybe I have not been able to convince them still to go about. They go to their local family doctor they have been trusting for at least 25 years. But did you also feel this problem coming up for first time users, and any suggestions on how did you solve that?
No,
And
no. So that's what I'm exactly what I'm talking about. That even I don't today use online consultation. Okay,
understood.
and my parents even don't. Okay, and hence if I look close to my circle and everybody, and also having my own personal opinion about how healthcare should be, I would think that it's not something that probably I will be able to convince my users about. Okay,
Understood.
but
Yeah,
the
they
numbers tell a different story. Okay, so there is a good population which is using it. Okay,
understood.
and they are not highly unsatisfied. It's just that, yes, there's maybe some constraints about which kind of problems they are going to doctors with, but there is adoption.
Understood.
Yeah. So exactly, that's what my point is, that we never thought that it will have people who will say that I have met people who say that I regularly use that for small things, and not
Understood.
only it's a tier 2, tier 3, or even slightly affluent. So for a general physician or some kind of basic problems, people will just give it a online consultation call.
When we speak about these NHP users, I think you also worked at Meesho for a brief while. So on an overall level, I think these are very, very interesting use cases. But as important is healthcare, right? When people are buying that stuff online today, obviously Mintra captures a large part of the audience, but Meesho, I think, was one of the first platforms. A lot of people from tier 2 and tier 3 made their online purchases, right? And I think they would have been really worried about what would happen if, let's say, this size does not fit me, if my money is not returned to me. So from all of those aspects, what was, let's say, any critical learning that you want to share, that small, any minor product design decision that really helped build that trust, that hey, you can come shop and you are in safe hands and everything will work perfectly and smoothly.
Yeah, I think there are two things. Okay,
Mhm.
because if you talk about Meesho, Meesho is instrumental in building a segment. Okay,
Yeah.
so but if you see how Meesho went into that segment, it itself is a story to be picked up, right?
Yeah.
So Meesho, and we're talking about almost 5 6 years back.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a huge population which was not purchasing or doing any online transaction,
Understood.
right?
Yeah.
And it was to imagine that you would be able to convince them to download an app and make a, you know, do a transaction was
Mhm.
really difficult. The only way that could happen is that if, you could bypass that whole exercise of trying to pitch them an app and, have a trust, and then so
Yeah.
that's where the reseller business came into picture. I
Okay.
think more than design, I think it's a complete business model innovation that happened. Okay,
Understood.
because the whole idea was that this person is not online, he has never ordered online, and
Mhm.
this person will never do that online just because they see an ad on TV.
Understood.
So somebody will have to help that person to come online and do that first transaction.
Understood.
So the resellers were the main levers who started doing that. And so the way it worked was that Misho, these resellers are basically pseudo entrepreneurs. They are in this tier two, tier three, who are the ones who know how to do online transactions and everybody. And they also have an interest to sell clothes. And everybody in India, I think I used to talk about three things. India runs on three axes. Okay, I mean, like one is growth. People are looking for growth. Either it's a financial or their, status or their learning growth. These three are very important. So if you give them something around this, large Indian population will latch onto it. Either financial, or status growth or learning growth or something, which eventually leads to some kind of either of these two, right? The second is fun,
Understood.
because a lot of people, the Indian, when we say next billion users, they also are like, they are working hard, they are doing something, there's a lot of also frustration, anger, and they want to bring it out by having some fun somewhere. So either a gaming, doing something online, which, or watching a reel or something, or this entertainment. So these are again the another axis. And the third is community.
Understood.
Everybody wants to feel belonging to some place. Okay, they end up making their own community. So this is what is going on in the NBU, right? And so we basically entered that growth area because all this tier 2 tier 3 people are trying to earn some extra bucks, because everybody wants to grow in their life in terms of financially. And when these resellers or the micro entrepreneurs came onto the platform, they sold those clothes and those products to their community
Understood.
and through WhatsApp, and they did, and this community did not have to come to the app. And I think this was the biggest, I would say, unblock that Misho did. And as a
Understood.
result, it built this entire new segment, which got exposed to online purchase first with the help of a reseller, and then eventually when Misho became direct to customer, and they already had built that network, that people were saying, okay, okay, we have done that exercise. It's something like, I would give another example, which is the COD,
Understood.
that what Flipkart introduced. The problem is that if you are expecting people, and before COD, the only way
Mhm.
to imagine that somebody would do an online transaction was through a credit card.
Yeah.
And if you are going to trying to convince that, okay, please go and buy a credit card and then come and shop to your site, it's a long loop.
Very
Okay,
low.
you will never break that. That's where I think the genius of COD comes in, where it says, okay, forget about it. So in the design, what we have done in the past is that it was say that, if you can make the user make the first order possible.
Understood.
Okay. And the trust, you can talk about 100 things, but I think at the end of the day, and some of these solutions are like, reseller and all of that are the business model unblocked. But from a design point of view, our primary thing was how to make the first order the most frictionless order and most easy to kind of make that choice. So there are two big blockers there. One is that the whole process of taking the phone number, address, and like everything. The second is also to decide that, okay, which, if I spend too much time trying to decide something, then probably I will bounce off at some point of time. So you had to figure out that which were the, with a little bit of science, that which are the most chanceable products that you're going to purchase if you are coming from such a demography, you're coming from such location, and you show that to the user, and you reduce the number of steps so much, obviously giving the confidence that you can return it, no questions asked, or give some discount to that person and make the first order possible. So that was at least a strategy that we had there, which is make the first order very, very easy, because
Understood.
once they taste that experience of that it is possible online, which they had done, I think it's going to stay back.
Awesome, awesome. No, that's a fantastic story of how I think both from a business perspective and design perspective. How I look at it is that maybe the local resellers also imbibe confidence that hey,
Yeah,
your money is not going anywhere. So I think if they would not have been present at that scale which Meesho had from a reseller ecosystem, I think it would have not really took off, because those resellers were like people, the kirana wala that we trust since a lot of years,
exactly.
right? And we
Yeah,
are okay to try new brands and new things. And then second aspect of increasing activation by making it very easy and let's say reducing the friction. I think some of the experiments with Zomato did by adding voice notes in terms of addresses, right, where the address
mm,
is, so that you don't have to type a lot but you can simply call it out. I think those kind of innovations from a design perspective really have gone a long way in bringing people online and doing that. And yeah, I think great insights, Shayak. Thank you for sharing that. And I think great to learn. Summarizing, I think persuasion by design, attention and trust. I think you mentioned that go ahead and understand the core problem for people and then sort of try and sort of build around that. And if you're able to do that, I think people will generally sort of trust and then perform that action. So yeah, a bunch of great learnings there. Moving to the next theme, I think given you have held leadership roles at so many important firms out there, a lot of times one of the key things that organizations as they scale try to do is sort of create design systems, right? And generally in startups there's a lot of push and pull that goes on, whether you should create one or not, what is the right time to create one. And then there are a lot of challenges that obviously come when it takes a lot of time, but then ensuring that it is being consistently followed, right? So before we deep dive into some questions that we got from the community that they wanted to ask you, but any overlay of how you approach design systems, do you feel they are useful? And then eventually what your framework has been in the past few years.
yeah. So I think design systems are very critical now, more so.
Understood.
In Practo, we built our design system called Omega, and in 2018, when we were building that, I think design system existed before that, but we were building it for the first time. I think one of the first earliest companies which were building, investing so much time into building a design system. But the bigger question is that, is it a glorified style guide? I never looked at it like that. Okay, design system is a much more living, breathing system that should evolve over the time. Uh, However, there's a big part to it, which is how is it built? Okay, because designers build only the design side of the design system, but there's a tech side of the design system, right? And if these two are built in the right way, design system is extremely powerful. And now in the AI world, building the right design system is going to be the key. How work, efficiency comes into the system.
Understood.
I think the previously the problem was that you spend a lot of time building a design system,
Yeah.
and even if you get it coded, then after some time you want to change the look and feel, and then it becomes a huge issue. There should be no reason for having that kind of constraint if you build it rightly, and you have built the evolutionary framework around the design system also, so that over the time it can keep, you can change it, and you can bifurcate it, you can duplicate it, you can keep evolving it over the time. That is very critical. Those systems are still not very matured across, but once you do that, it's a superpower. Designers can then focus on a lot of other things than just working on the visuals of it and the UI part of it. So I think with AI it becomes very, very important, because see, at the end of the day, the AI has to work on the tokens and the basics, and all the references of your choices and tokens will be coming from the design system. So that part becomes. I think, and it's not. I think the way the design systems are going to develop is also going to change, because till now we also only used to make those components and pieces, but the just choices and everything around it and how you document it and context
Hmm.
building happens about it is also going to become very, very critical.
No, no, very, very fair. See, I also come from the same school of thought that it is very, very important, and it also reduces, I think, the time to ship and also the context for, let's say, when new people come in, they don't have to spend a lot of time in terms of understanding what would work for your users or not. But generally, I think the tussle happens, Shayaka, that what is the right time when you should start thinking about having a design system in your organization, right? What stage of the startup, what scale of the users, what are the
True.
challenges that give you, let's say, initial signal that hey, now this is the right time, because it takes away some part of the bandwidth. So any sort of quick insights from your end, any quick guidance on that?
See, I mean, I think, by the way, I don't think that any, I think every designer today is aware of design system.
Understood.
Yes, previously a smaller company or a earlier startup probably did not have to think too much from a point of view of design system, because but but I think everybody builds a design system. It's just that this what is the depth of it when it comes to how, see this. I think even if you're making a very small, let's say six screen app, you technically have a design system which is nothing much more than a style guide, but
Yep.
you still have a design system, so called. It's just that the complexities of it that you start adding.
Mhm.
And let's say, imagine I make an app which is only six screen app, and I don't need a design system, but I do have a kind of a design system which have few parameters and all of that variables. But then the app is such that it has to every geolocation that it identify, it completely changes its look, form and shape. The theme changes, then obviously you will have to develop a bit of a system there, right? Or have to build that uh, backend system which supports that theme conversion. And so there's no strict rule about that when it can get applied, but I see whenever the complexities start coming in, it's important to start looking at that, how much you want to develop so design side of the design system is definitely going to get built everywhere now. I think
Yep.
every designer knows that they have to build the system, but the coding part of it, where you actually code those components and save them in a proper system, that part, how much you want to invest and do, depends upon, like what you said, how fast you want to be the go-to market to be, how complex your system is, how much investment is there on the platform level thing. Because it's interesting, because a very mature design system also is a good amount of investment.
Yep.
So we used to give reference to Gojek at some point of time, because Gojek used to have a good platform team which was purely dedicated to design system
Understood.
at some point of time. Now, I recently came to know that probably that team has merged into different pieces, and so there are different forms. Like you can have a central team, you can have distributed team or something like that. Okay, where the team members are working on something else, but they dedicate 10%, 20% of their effort to a design. So
Understood.
initially they are a central team, but then they become a distributed team. We used to
Understood.
give the reference to Gojek that see, they have a central team, but now they have become a distributed. But then on the result play, they have a central team.
Understood.
So different companies are attacking this problem in a different way. And yeah, you have to find how to. I think that part is the one that has not got solved completely, because in this kind of high velocity that you need to kind of in a B2C company, plus see B2Bs which are slightly more stable, they you can have much more investment there on the design system, and the value is very obvious.
Yep.
When the B2C, there are so many changes continuous, how much do you want to invest, and how much scale at which that you want to do this design system is something that becomes a very specific exercise which is contextual to that setup.
No, no, I think fair point, and thank you for sharing so much depth onto that, Shayak. I think what I understood is that I think design systems obviously are very, very critical. The stage and the depth in which they might exist would change, right? Even a six-screen app has some form and shape of a design system which helps maintain consistency for the users, but then over a period of time, it would become much more complex. I think you also answered that whether all the team members should contribute to it, or let's say that you should have a separate team. I think that depends on the stage of the organization and how things are evolving.
We're all experimenting on that. I think different companies are experimenting in different ways. I think one is, to be honest, 6 7 years back, design system was not thought to be important.
Understood.
And what used to happen was that I would say most of the designers who came together in the larger organization, let's say you have a 20-member design team, and
Understood.
when, let's say, around 2012, 13, 14, 15, or whatever, when
Understood.
the company started having larger design teams, you
Okay.
had multiple design managers who were coming from different places,
Mm-hmm.
and they were actually used to building um, they were used to doing a project
Understood.
by their own taste. Okay, so everybody had their own taste. So even in a company with three, four managers, each manager would have their own point of view about that. Okay, the design has to be like this. I like the shadow like this. Somebody would say, okay, I like the corner radius like this. I like something like this.
Yeah.
And there
Yeah.
was never any consensus about that. It was very difficult to have a consensus about that. Okay, no, there has to be one unified system, and
Yeah.
everybody would agree that there should be something which is consistent, but there would be a lot of tussles. I think that has now gone away.
Understood.
People know. I mean, the tussle is still there in the fact that okay, we need to do this or that. But then those kind of after those decisions are done, people don't easily. I think that overall ecosystem has matured in the last 7 8 years. So design system has become very standard now. Only how do you do that at scale is something which is we are still figuring out.
No, no, fair. I think one of the things that you have also spoken about on public forums in the past is that a design system should not be, let's say, very, very standardized. It has to be a living a system, more like an algorithm that should keep guiding you, let's say, in the right direction. When do you, let's say, what would you guide the team or, let's say, people listening to podcast that when should you, let's say, make a change to what you have incorporated as a system? How living should it actually be? Because obviously it takes a lot of time, right? So it again goes back to when do you sort of understand that these minor modifications which are making should go back and feed into the system as well, so that next time there is this problem and then this can be used as it is.
So about here, I think there are two parts to it. Okay, one is first part is a bit of when I say that it has to be living, breathing algorithmic design.
Yeah.
I think design system the way it is built right now,
Mm-hmm.
that overall technology has to evolve. So it has not evolved right now. The other part which you are saying, I will come to that a little later. But the first part that you are saying is that how much it should change in the current the way the design systems are built right now.
Understood.
There you have to build a process, and if somebody and then you can create those parameters like 80% of your designs are adhering to design system, 20% is something that you built for the first time, then it goes through a cycle of you know um, confirmation from various team members, or there is a governance to that, and it has a process. I think people have built that, working on that, and there are some systems around it, right? And
Understood.
I, what this itself is also a living breathing organism that you say, but the cycle is very small, right?
Understood.
And sometimes it keeps breaking. So yeah, I th- my when but what I imagine in the
Hmm.
future is that right now we work a lot on the design systems. When you're building it, we actually are working on a lot of absolute values.
Understood.
We need to work on more relative values, okay, which is something almost like how your css works, from going to saying that 200 pixel, or you are saying that 20% of whatever of the overall box. So
Should be variables
because
and frameworks and not absolute values in a way.
yeah, so even today in the variables, you are making completely new set of variables, okay, and then you are giving absolute values to these variables, okay.
Okay.
See, and we are reaching there, by the way. But it's something like that, I should be able to say that, okay, if my scale of this whole thing goes down,
Mm-hmm.
okay, in a certain situation like this and this, my header should go 20% down, and footer should go or the subheading should go 5% down, okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And how do you basically then document, or your design system is made up of the relationships,
Okay.
and not based on the absolute values. Now this is something which is slightly more, I'm saying, this
Understood.
is my imagination of how design system should be. And there are, of course, there is a base value that you start from, but everything else is then is a abstracted based on those relations that you build on top of it. This is something that I think will eventually evolve our design systems, because it is practically impossible to keep building for different mediums. And because right now I have to build a design system which is slightly different for um, desktop, mobile, or let's say tomorrow AR VR comes in and
Yeah.
everything. So you have to define everything, every variable separately. That's not
Hmm.
possible. And that's where I think AI will also play a big role, because once you
Yeah.
have those relationships documented and properly identified, then your design system becomes in true nature a very, very evolving ecosystem. And then all you need to do is that basically change those variables.
Understood.
So yeah, that is a broad part of it, and obviously specific scenarios will always require very different exercises. So I think the design system, that's what I feel, that it's still not, the concept is right, the
Okay.
concept exists, but it's the tactics and all the elements of it has not been yet evolved to a level where is very solid now. So I think there's a lot of growth or development that we will see.
No, no, fair, fair. I think from a tech perspective as well, I think as we see that, I think AI has been evolving the speed at which we are shipping products, right? And in future, it is expected to go. I think design systems will really enable and empower the teams to actually ship more, get user feedback, and then evolve. But I think the frameworks that you mentioned should be at the centricity of it so that it does not
Yeah.
derail what we are trying to do as well. That brings me to very, very important point, because design systems generally sort of come in handy in what I have felt maybe as the organization or the design org starts to scale, right? So we come to the theme three, Shayak, where we wanted to understand, I think, as a design leader, given today you are responsible for not only building and managing teams but also hiring the next set of talent. How do you think about, let's say, building a comprehensive design team today, which, let's say, has mixture of everything you will need to make your product really, really successful? How do you decide the split? What all skill set do you look at? And someone who is starting today, and let's say who aspires to be on your team, what skill should they start just picking up today?
No, I think again, see, I mean, building a design team, I would always start with asking this question that, what the organization need, what is the kind of design requirement it has, and then
Understood.
I will be building my team according to that. And the
Understood.
composition can be very different from, organization to organization. Having said that, the other part which you mentioned, that what a skill set should somebody should pick up, this also depends upon, I mean, like, everybody should play on their strengths.
Understood.
So it's not that, let's say, I tell that, okay, focus on product thinking, then somebody has to necessarily focus on product thinking. Okay,
Understood.
we can talk about the overall framework for designers to think. There are two frameworks that I have in, I usually talk about. One is what a new fresh designer should look at, the overall canvas of design,
Mhm.
and what they should pick up and learn if they want to come into the industry. Slightly a kind of a directional idea to what they should be doing. The other is, like I say, that that professional expert apprentice model that I talk about, which
Okay.
also gives a model about how to think about craft. But yes, everybody has their own journey, and they will have to work on their strength to figure it out. As experienced folks, we can share more anecdotes and stories, and people can pick it from there and figure out what they have to do. Having said that, typically there are one thing that I've experienced in my different, building different teams, that there are two types of designers. One, designers are very methodical in thinking, which is very linear thinking,
Hmm.
which is, you have a problem, you break down the problem, and then, as you break down the problem, you start solving it. Okay, and then you use the first principle thinking and then solve it, and you come up with a solution. And that's a very linear way of solving that problem. And
Understood.
then there are some designers who come intuitively, and they are, I would say, they come from a very abstract inspiration, and they try to force fit a solution into that, right? And not necessarily thinking that they're trying to force fit, but they imagine the solution into that kind of a, okay, thing. Now I think what I've seen is that you need a healthy mix of these two people.
Understood.
And a good healthy mix should be that you still need more forward linear thinking people, because your BAU depends upon that. If you have to go fast to the market, if you have to get things solved, you want your designers to be really able to work really well with the product managers and business, then you need the first kind of designers more.
Understood.
Okay, and then you will have, then maybe 20-30% of the other, those designers who are like some who come with intuition. So what happens is that what I've seen is that the first set of designers, they will build a lot of things fast and everything. So 8 out of 10 things that they build are actually all logical and good to go. Okay,
Understood.
and two of them might not be okay, and all is fine. But on the other side, two of the design should might be, are really useful, but the eight are actually not useful
Understood.
when you come by only by intuition, because many of them are not very effective. But those two solutions which are suddenly so brilliant and beautiful that that you suddenly change the way you look at something. Like for example, in some cases you see the when you're giving a rating and you click on the star, it becomes a smiley. A forward or linear thinking guy probably will not come up with that idea because his mind is not mapped to that, okay, that this can relate to an emoji. But you give it to a very creative
Creative.
person and suddenly somebody, can we do it like this? So I personally always find it really amazing when you have these two kind of people in a good mix.
Understood.
That's a healthy mix.
Understood. And I think, sorry, but how do you measure creativity? What are the frameworks that you have used in the past while you're recruiting such kind of designers or people on your team?
So it's slightly difficult because unless you work with somebody for some time, you don't get that. But sometimes it's only sometimes in their portfolio, because the
Understood.
problem is the way the portfolios are designed also caters to very linear thinking process. Even if somebody actually is creative, they will be also showcasing their work in a linear process. There are designers who break that mold, and sometimes you can see in their work and in their execution. For example, there was one designer I was looking at. They had for a particular kind of solution, they have taken inspiration, I mean, for a travel tech,
Hmm.
they have taken an inspiration from a Kanban kind of experience and try
Understood.
to marry it. Now it's very bold, it's very new, it's very different. The other thing is that somebody could try to do that but do a very bad execution, but the execution was also very nice. The other part is that it might not be very effective. I'm sure, that's a good experiment, but could be also a very big failure. But at least the fact that
They're
you
breaking the
could
mold.
you could break it and you could actually imagine it like that, is something that tells something about.
Yeah. Another digging deep on this, but do you think this can be learned or this comes innately to people?
I think partly can be learned, but it definitely few people are wired like that, I would say. And by the way, sometimes the people who are wired like that, they are very difficult to also work with. Matlab, and they also find it difficult to work in a setup like a very structured setup like this. So I have seen those struggles also.
Sure.
I think somebody was asking me this question that how will you deal with that kind of a person who is very creative and all of that? And I think if I have the ideal setup and in my mind, in my hand, I will like to build the environment around that person to be able to play, then try to coach that person to become more structured like everybody else. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't have that liberty, and maybe then in that case, they deserve a better platform or they deserve a better place to work and on their system.
No, no, fair point. Because I think creativity is something that I've also seen comes is very limited to few people. There are general
Hmm.
processes which people can learn and execute, but then
Yeah.
those out of the box thinking is very, very difficult to find. But when you get these people, I think they want to operate in their lens.
Hmm.
Maybe that is the reason that they are so creative, right? Because they don't want to stick to the mold and operate within frameworks and
Yeah.
guidelines. But yeah, I think that has been one challenge, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on it. When we look at how teams are getting built, Shaq, and when you are building your own team, what is the impact of AI that you foresee? Do you foresee that number of people that would be required for, let's say, same articulation from a design perspective will reduce, or do you see it will increase because you will experiment more? So, what are your thoughts sitting at the top of the ladder right now?
I think the first thing that comes to your mind is that obviously because AI will take away some of the grunt work. So maybe there can be a slight reduction in the team sizes and all, like
Okay,
but of course the people who are there will need to be really really they will be deep into this work and they will use AI as a really tool. But then the question comes is that if the organization saves that money, what do they do with it? I mean, like so then rather have more people working with AI to do more experiments. So the second point is also very relevant. That, and I don't have an answer to that right now. You see,
understood.
it is totally depends upon how the maths work out. But it could be that you have maybe the work the workforce that you need for the kind of high agency work that you're doing will not go down, okay, because you can do more experiments with that. Purely low agency work, yeah, I mean, that's, I think, is quite obvious.
And from a skill set perspective, do you think anything will change? Because how, for example, Figma has, or let's say Framer has come up, right, with their easy no code web pages, etc. Do you think anything will change from a skill set perspective, or anything that you are already seeing and witnessing at your organization?
Yes, I mean, we definitely are seeing. I think the best thing that is happening is that I like, and which is something that excites me also. See, one is this tooling allows somebody to quickly vibe code something and build something. So, yes, prototyping, quickly building something is going to be really, really helpful, and all of that is happening. I think that's a no brainer. So, I think the design process, the vibe coding has a lot of role to play.
Understood.
Outside, people used to make websites. I mean, small agencies, I mean, freelancers were building websites for clients and all of that. They will get much better with this, coding process. But I think
Understood.
what is, which is, I think, see, like Figma, when they came up with variables, my first imagination was, so, okay, digressing from that. So when I was young, we used to work in Flash. Okay, there was a Macromedia Flash. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard.
And there used to be something called action script, and I have studied plus a little bit of, like, in the school and the college also. So you could write conditional statement, and fundamentally you could attach conditional coding, I mean action script. You could do action script and use it to move elements on the flash canvas, right? I was really surprised when that power was totally gone from designers, where unless and until you are purely on the front end coding. So Flash was a platform where it married design and
Engineering.
engineering and conditioning designing possible, which is
Understood.
something that now again will come back, I hope, because Figma was came with variables. My first thought was that are they bringing in coding and everything onto that? But actually, it is going to come with AI now, and this is going to be very critical for designers, because
Understood.
more and more designers need to understand this part, I mean, or at least a good segment. Like I said, right, 80% of those forward thinking designers, okay,
Mhm.
who are very structured in their manner, they need to know this. Definitely, maybe the people who are 20%, pure creative, they might want to skip that part, and that's fine. But sometimes even they find very
Difficult.
interesting ideas out of that. Yes, that's the good part that I'm seeing that is happening, at least in the design way, and this will definitely lead to some really good workflows and developments, and how even design systems are designed, and how we build our prototype, how we build our workflows. The other part is that I feel, I have a hunch that a lot of this now even a designer, or a young guy who is not a designer, or anybody could actually vibe code a tool. Let's say I'm a CA, chartered accountant, and I have a very unique way of creating a SIP calculator, SIP calculator, and I just design it with vibe coding. Now the question is, that problem is that how do I distribute this? Like, everybody will be doing this. I think it's the
Yeah.
same thing which was like when videos came into picture, and video making was so easy, but YouTube become a platform where videos could be placed. So I do feel that, imagine that a CA who runs a channel on YouTube, and on the video itself there's a link, and you click on that, the SIP calculator opens up, and you can do your calculations. So I see either a pure marketplace for tools, or a combination of content and tooling, interactive tools that can go together and become and can sit on a marketplace. Social media can be the right place. Meta could be building something like that, where
Yeah.
today, just to do a poll, you have only 4 or 5 formats to do a poll, right,
Yeah.
which Meta provides you. But tomorrow, let's say you have a platform where you can design your own polls, whatever you do.
Understood.
What is vibe coding? At the end of the day, it's basically, conditional, statements that you can write. And so
No, no, I think definitely. I think now with all the innovation that is happening, I think in a way it is democratization of being able to do maybe some form of design, if not good design. And I think what you mentioned, right? I think because now everyone can design or vibe code or create a product, I think what would become important is that, how I see, and please feel free to correct me, is that designers, I think, would create that differentiation on what problem we are solving, how we are going about it, and then obviously the growth part of it, right? Not everyone will be able to.
But I slightly disagree to this. I mean, saying that once this vibe coding becomes a platform level thing, like
Hmm.
Instagram or YouTube, it's not just the designers who have to do this, because you see, video making now, anybody can create an Instagram video and the people will decide that whether it's good or not.
Understood.
So, yes, as a maybe there will be some
So the
guardrails
bar
around that.
will go high. Do you think the bar will go high of who, let's say, is solving the right problem?
No, I see. I think ability to create, and what are we creating when we are doing vibe coding? I mean,
Mm.
see, one is that we imagine that everybody will start creating very deep softwares. I don't think that's going to happen, right? Because the backend and everything, that is a very different story altogether. When we say software, we mean those large, big softwares which has a lot of complexity in the back. Vibe coding, the front end part of it, which is solving some, just like video. Like if previously we used to think that only good video makers or filmmakers can make relevant videos, but now
Mm.
everybody can be a video creator.
Yeah,
And end of the day, people decide what is good versus bad. Is
yeah,
if the is the content important, is the look and feel important, is whatever. So it's completely now democratized. So I think with this is what I think, that bar, whether it's high or low,
hmm,
see, I mean, the public can decide that I need low bar also. The kind of movies that we are having these days, you can, this is a testimony of that, right? So uh, it's just that it will democratize definitely tools, interactions, and everything, which I think is going to completely.
fair point.
Mm.
So, I think before we wrap up this theme, just one last question: what tools or what nudges are you giving to your team these days? Which aspect should they pick up so that they are not left
Yeah.
behind in the AI race?
No, I think a couple of things. One is that first is try all tools. Hmm.
Okay.
Okay. Also nudging those who are not organically into this area, is that to start doing this, even tools like Cursor,
Mm-hmm.
Lovable, or Bolt, and everything. So I think it's very important to at least understand that how these systems work.
Understood.
Okay. Then also, I think continuous upgrade of what is going on in the AI world. And the third, I think, is very important, is that start imagining new workflows.
Very
So this
critical.
is some, yeah. So, and just be as bold and possible, and just imagine it and start thinking about that. How can we circumnavigate some of the very obvious workflows that we have, which might not be relevant. Okay, and we can actually create more efficiency. So I see a lot of interesting ideas coming up.
No, no, I think I just yesterday I was reading that first. I think the workflow of buying something was that you go on an app or a product, you add them to the cart, then you check out. Today with ChatGPT, the storefront that they are creating, you start chatting, you share your requirements, and then in one tap you are able to check out. And obviously the agentic commerce platform, and then all of that will come up. But very early
Oh,
days.
by the way, there's a huge debate on that part, because the one that I was talking about is primarily about internal workflow management and everything. But how interfaces will have to evolve with AI is
Mhm.
still getting developed. I think I don't. So, for example, you mentioned, right,
Yeah.
there is intentional, non-intentional purchases. Okay, so
Okay.
the point is, will storefront go away? Okay, is a very big question. I don't think storefronts are going to go away, because sometimes you need a nudge to start looking at something without even using your mind. And see, I mean, the current chat is a very high agency, or high. There's a very high investment in actually conversing with it.
Explaining
Okay,
yourself. Mm.
so I don't think that the current chat, the model is going to be applicable for all kind of use cases all the time. Okay,
Understood.
and hence we will see a lot of evolution there. Even like I was talking to somebody recently, and they say, I want to, let's build something which helps the kids to talk to an agent and other. But kids are young kids, right? It's not that they will always know what to ask. Okay, and what do you do
Very
there, and how do you marry these two scenarios together? So I think
good.
these problems are the ones that will have to be solved, and
Mm.
this is a very interesting area, to be frank.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, I understand. And I think with all the changes that are happening, I think what will be the solution obviously today is unknown. But I think what is important is just that I think what you recommended, that we keep fighting to figure out what can be the new ways of doing things, which is, let's say, in the AI world. Before we jump to the last section, Shek, just one overview of, let's say, I think you mentioned Joy sir, right? And when we were talking, he mentioned that how today design by a lot of people is perceived as, let's say, designing of CTA or a flow, but it is much larger than that, right? It's solving the natural, it's learning from the natural ecosystem, it's actually solving problem, and everything that you do as a designer can shape human behavior at that scale, right, for the good or the better. So how do you, let's say, look at it, and where do you think design as a field or a profession is heading, not just by the whatever AI is doing, but on an overall level, and anything that you feel is missing which you would want to, let's say, change in how this entire stuff is working right.
Yeah, I think again, I have two areas where I kind of look at it. One part is there's a bit of a science aficionado in me, which is trying to
Okay.
figure out that what is the natural progression of any field and find patterns and extrapolate from that, which is a purely mathematical or a kind of an exercise. So that is one area where somebody could be very interested in, and I personally am, and I like
Understood.
to study that. But the other part, which is like in the daily execution, I think we covered that part a bit at some point of time, which basically was about that designers previously had a much more broader view of things. And here again, two parts. The first part is that, like I said, that you need to know a lot of things, and you could be looking across touch points. So I think if designers can go back to those times where you are
Understood.
building experiences. The problem is that the world has also moved on to building, you see, kind of, and especially specifically to the things around us. For example, our apartment communities try to all good within the apartment communities. So okay, and then as soon as you go out, then the system breaks down, and then you have a metro rail, and then you don't have the connectivity to the metro rail. Now,
Understood.
as the designers, you were taught to kind of look at all the system holistically and do a service design kind of exercise where you connect all of these dots and make each and everything seamless for the user. But in today's world, I think the priorities are very different right now.
Understood.
Okay, now designers, it's just that cannot be that the designers are pushing for it and the market is not ready for it. But eventually, I think when you do that, the quality of life improves and everything
Understood.
really gets better. I hope that it happens more.
Understood.
Like we are talking about that whether design should be a part of the government agency agenda also or not. See how
Understood.
over bridges are built without an escalator. Then who is going to use that? Huh? That
Understood.
over bridge, old people or kids supposed to climb a staircase that high. So what is the thought process behind it? What is the design considerations behind it in terms of accessibility, in terms of everything?
Mhm.
So I think there's a lot of role for designers to play there across various touch points. The other part is that which is all about depth of design. What you understand over the time is that design is also about making choices which are much more conscious, and this doesn't have to be high on volume, but it could be, and this basically spans across how a designer develops, evolves. So when you are young as a designer, you basically are going through, you are learning tools and you are executing, and that's what excites you. And that also is very very good time, because if I've learned Figma and I'm a fresher, and suddenly somebody comes and tells me, okay, you want to build this, and I can quickly build something because I can imagine and I can quickly build it. Those are very exciting times. Okay, but after some time, 3 4 5 years, I feel that designer style feelings getting stagnated, because the amount of change or delta that you get by putting those effort seems very low now, as it used to be in the earlier days. So as a result, many designers also get frustrated at some point of time. What I'm doing, I'm building the same screen, same something.
Understood.
But what I've realized that is, when you do that, and if you continue working on those things, and now you're working in either an organization or in some setup, and life is also happening to you, because design is not only about just making the screen and using some logical concept to kind of put together something.
Yeah.
But you get married, you have kids, and you have experienced life, and as you experience life, you are able to actually bake all of that into some design choices that you make. Sometimes what happens is that after that, evolution happens. Even you are putting a single button,
Understood.
okay, and maybe you would have put that button previously out of pure logic, but you put the same button now not only with logic but also with a lot of empathy. The design
Fair.
doesn't change, but now you're much aware of the design.
Why
And I
you are
think why you're doing that, and it's much more well understood and well weighted out against the whole whatever you're trying to build. So I think that transition happens. I think that is something which more designers should look forward to reaching that stage where every design choices that you're making, you should be making more and more lesser choices, but very, very deeper choices. So it's not about filling the whole screen with buttons, but one button you put at the same place, but you're more aware of that, why you have done that. So I think that development is also something that.
No, no, that is an awesome articulation, Shayak, where you mentioned that maybe you do lesser, but you do deeper work. And I think that's a brilliant way on how design will evolve and then how designers should also evolve. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that perspective.